We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
All right, Cal, we see a lot of folks in the Democratic Party that they're stepping down ahead of the 2022 congressional elections. Mostly these are safe seats, of course, so there's no major issue for the Democrats here. But I think, and I guess many other people also think that the way this administration is going, relying on the strictly party line votes that they have been so far to get pretty much anything done, that we're going to see a lot more folks from both parties step down in the near future, because most of these people, they didn't get into politics to spend their time in constant bickering and competition, having to, let's call it, throw away the last of their remaining principles to bolster a party. They went to DC to work for their constituents and to get rich. Just kidding, yeah. Sort of. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. I wrote recently, how do some of these people come to Washington as thousandaires and leave millionaires when they're getting a salary of roughly $175,000 a year? You got lobbyists in there with free things and free food and travel and all sorts of other things. It's corrupting. I mean, there was a columnist years ago, Jack Anderson, who wrote a column called The Washington Merry-Go-Round. And then there was another columnist that talked about, there was Potomac, something. Anyway, Trump touched on this when he spoke about the swamp. And it is a swamp, and it is corrupting. Because as soon as you get there, you have to start raising money for your next campaign. And you sell off pieces of your soul to various interest groups to do that. It's incredibly corrupting. This is why the founders never expected politics to be a career. There are people coming from their law offices, from businesses, from farms to serve their country for a limited time. George Washington being the model for that. He could have run for a third term, but he went home to Mount Vernon. Could have easily won. And they didn't expect these guys to become career politicians. This is why term limits are so necessary. I may have told you this story before. George McGovern, 1972 presidential candidate in the Democrat ticket, friend of mine, senator from South Dakota, lost in the Reagan landslide of 1980 and decided to do something totally different, went up to Connecticut and bought an inn and tried to run it. It went bankrupt after a couple of years, and the Wall Street Journal called him up, want to know what happened. And then the only thing you need to know about what happens to politicians when they stay too long in Washington, George McGovern said, gee, if I'd known how difficult it was to run a business, I might have voted differently in the Senate. And that says all you need to know about people who stay too long in Washington.
Right, that brings us nicely on to the question that I referred to earlier. So I want to take a little step back in time. Now, as you know, when ancient Athens sort of came into its own, first through the reforms of Solon, and then I think it was Clisthenes, who became known as the father of Athenian democracy. Now, that was considered this grand experiment, one that sought to give each household in the city-state a voice. And here's the thing, the laws, they were written in plain language in public squares so that every man, woman, and child, those who knew their letters, could read and understand them. And today we have a constitution and a Bill of Rights that I find quite interesting and easy to read. It's very simple. It lays out what this is what things should be, and these are what your rights are, and this is how they're protected. But it seems that now it requires an army of lawyers and politicians to explain the subtleties and to argue over the subtleties of why rights that we thought were enshrined, that's just not so. And it seems that America is straying very much from this Athenian and of course, the Roman influence faster day by day. So how do we stop the piecemeal destruction of the nation's founding documents?
Well, again, it goes back to education and what is being taught in our schools and the next generation of people who are going to lead this country or any Western country for that matter. You mentioned the Greeks, John Knox, the founders of this country, all believed that power flowed from the people and that government was instituted among men and women for the purposes of promoting the general welfare, not the individual welfare of politicians. But today, especially in the United States, power is seen as coming from the top. You look at these vaccine mandates. You look at these federal regulations everywhere. You take an airplane ride, there's 10 minutes of safety and federal regulation announcements, including not messing with a smoke detector in the bathroom, keeping your mask on at all times, unless you are sipping a drink or eating food, and then you're supposed to replace the mask while you're swallowing, I guess. Nobody says, well, if the virus is there and sees you drinking and eating, is it not going to invade your body? It's all theater. It's manufactured by government elites who want to increasingly have control of our lives and individual decisions. This is completely contrary to the Constitution. We have a 10th Amendment for a purpose, and it says, as I'm paraphrasing, all rights not specifically granted to the federal government shall be reserved for the individual states and for the people. That is completely ignored now. Bob Dole, a former senator and presidential candidate, used to carry that 10th Amendment around in his pocket and remind people of it. But now, with the government serving like an ATM, doling out goodies to everybody, entitlements, benefits, you hear them on the commercials. We have open season now on Medicare. And the television stations and networks are flooded with Medicare supplement ads. Every single one of them contains the words entitled and benefit. And those are code words for envy, greed, and entitlement. I deserve things. Oh, that's the other word, deserve. I deserve the benefit and the entitlement, the unholy trinity.
Yeah, with the flight, I avoid the issue with removing the mask because I drink Bloody Marys constantly, all throughout the entire. It doesn't matter how long the flight is, because it's the tomato juice. It's better for you because you get the flavor, because there's a difference in flavor taste when you're at higher altitudes.
I'm with you. That's good.
Carl Thomas, we'll leave it on that. Thank you ever so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mark.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. And remember, you can tune in for Liberty Nation Radio from 2 to 3 p.m. Sunday on KBKW 103.5 FM, 1450 AM, the talk of Grays Harbor. Coming up soon on the show, we'll be talking Liberty and dissecting the crowd crush at Travis Scott's Astro World Festival. But next up, we're meeting Tim Donner to figure out how Biden's numbers went from bad to worse. Don't touch that dial. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.